People, welcome to a Digital World Town Hall General Council meeting, which happens every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. It just so happens we're in the 2026 year, February 10th, which is the fifth week of the year. And oh no, I did it again. There we go. Don't have to stop it. Cool. So the agenda will go as follows. We will focus on the last week over the first 30 minutes. So for 30 minutes, we'll go over advancements this last week. Then we will have general Q&A. We are joined by a live audience from around the world. Some fun folks from, actually, we were talking about Alaska just a second ago. And it just so happens that we actually have some new folks online with us. We've literally said a sentence to each other, but invited this gentleman, his name is Michael, to give us an opening prayer as we get things kicked off. So we'll go ahead and take that time. Michael, if you would.
Dear Divine Spirit, our Father, our Mother, our Creator, please thank you for this opportunity that we have to come together and focus on how we can collectively help change the course of our nation and our world towards that more beautiful and just place our hearts know is possible. We are struggling to fight and maintain our freedoms and push back against the evil forces that we're up against. Please give us the strength, the clarity, the opportunity to demonstrate with courage and with humility all that you're asking us to do. Thank you so very much. In the Lord's name, amen.
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 It's wonderful to hear the spirit of many that align for the same goals and objectives, which is really to provide choice for humanity, which we know is actually what's the battle is all against. We recognize that there are different elements, that we are spirits inside of bodies, and that as this digital ecosystem evolves, that we need help. And we're grateful to be able to just take some time and ask for that help. Also grateful for all those that have been on this journey for so very long, and that we have the opportunity to come together as private individuals and to be able to make a difference. We recognize that the fight is against secret combinations. What's been interesting over the last, actually just yesterday, I usually don't get involved in news or sports or video games or any of that stuff. And yesterday I observed some people put up a feed, 1,000 different posts on the Epstein stuff. And I just watched a couple of them, and I'm a grown man that's seen a lot of stuff. I don't watch rated R movies, but I've seen a lot of garbage, and some of the stuff is just heartbreaking. But it helped me to take a step back and think, there really are secret combinations for a decade, and about is very, very real. Just to recognize these are also humans that have a choice too, and even a choice to change, even if they do something that is maybe incorrect. And the definition of incorrect, I guess, is really what all of us are here to choose and to understand. And through our choices, we can understand more and more knowledge and principles, and line upon line, we can basically become better. And that's what life, from my perspective, is all about, just to become and to believe and to learn and to grow. But what's being very controlled is when you take payments and identity and then AI and layer that around, we're getting some weird feedback, layer that around health. I believe that there's going to be a massive, compelling event that's even bigger than what we've seen with COVID, that will basically enslave humanity at a level that we can't understand or control. We're living through AI and robotics and wonderful times, wonderful advancements, but at the same time, we have a responsibility because of who we are, the time that we were raised, the dispensation that we get to live in, and the freedoms that we've been given to make sure that those are passed to future generations. And so understanding what this is, and even understanding what it's not, is really important. So these central systems these secret combinations, whether they're in pharmaceuticals or insurance or health or media or tech, they basically go into governments. And we have a gentleman here running for Congress today who we'll learn a little bit more about. But these secret combinations operate within the private and within the public. The public may be what the news or the media or the financial systems may want to feed you, but ultimately they end up controlling things behind the scenes along with project finance, which then continues just to create money out of nothing. And we wonder how systems are controlled and how the BlackRocks and the Vanguards and XYZs basically end up infiltrating different parts of society. You know, I personally have been to the World Economic Forum. I've been to Davos. I've met with some of these folks face to face well before COVID. I've been to the BRICS countries, except for one personally, well before COVID, from a week to a month each. And all I can say is humanity is good. And where we have an opportunity to be able to make it even better is through decentralized systems. Decentralized systems can actually take the control that these secret combinations are basically throwing at us and give us the opportunity to be able to provide choice and ultimately freedom for future generations. Some of you may not understand what that means, and we're going to walk through that just briefly and then talk about the advancements of this last week. Identity is the core and key to really solving a lot of these issues that these secret combinations are basically against, because as they divide people, whether it's through where you physically live or the language you speak or what they call class distinction, you know, the individual is actually key. And then and from the individual, then it comes family, and then it comes community, and then it comes other environments, whether you want to talk about states or providences or countries or kingdoms. But ultimately that identity is one layer that's core, and it's forgotten. It's actually skipped over in a lot of ways. Most of us have accounts, not a system that we can actually manage and control, but we have accounts that we log into. There's someone else's account and someone else's system, and they give us access to it, whether it's a bank account or a search account or an email account, etc. And with this identity, it changes that. Instead of starting with an account, it starts with an individual's identity, and it layers on top of that, whether it's storage or communications or finance or assets or endorsements. And today, the biggest thing we're going to talk about is endorsements. But first, I'm going to show you how it actually links together. It links together by people getting a key, 12 words, which is a private key that you keep, and it links to you as an individual, as a human, not as a robot, not as AI, but as a human. Your life, it matters. Then it uses a process of derived keys in everything that it does, which makes it very unique from any other system in the world. And the key is to combine the digital and physical ecosystems for future generations using these keys and this identity and the future of payments. What we're reporting out on this week is how we're basically focusing on these 5 topics: You Own You, Life Vault, Utah Life, Clear Autos, and this Life AI. We'll talk a lot about that, and we'll show you some massive advancements. The first advancement happened yesterday. This site with Senate Bill 275, which builds on Senate Bill 270, which is state endorsed digital identity program, is massive. In my opinion, this particular bill enables the individual to be an individual and has the state endorse them as an individual. So I'm going to break from this and just jump over to this real fast and kind of walk you through this. So first off, Senator Kurt Killamore, which is a wonderful man. I've spent some time with him, and his heart is good. His alignment is good. He's passed 100% of the bills that he's actually put in. And I believe that not only him, but a gentleman named Chris will actually enable this to become a very solid reality. The bill, basically, I'll jump into some of the elements down here. I'm actually going to have try and get to some of the specifics. Here we go. I'm actually going to read this first section here. And I hope that you see the potential in this for what it really is, a digital identity bill of rights, which is the opposite of what digital identity is around the world, from Nigeria, where they take away your cell phone number if you don't get a digital identity that connects to the government, to South Asia, where they take away your bank account if you don't do it, or even in Europe, where they started threatening to take away your right to work. There's many other parts of the world that are also trying to, in my opinion, from an unrighteous standpoint, basically control humanity. They have a governmental authority. And like I showed you with the slides earlier, those secret combinations, they work together to get into government to then control systems. So I'm going to read this to you again. This is a digital identity bill of rights from the state of Utah, which is called State Endorsed Digital Identity.
The following rights constitute the Digital Identity Bill of Rights in this state. 1. An individual possesses an individual identity innate to the individual's existence and independent of the state, which identity is fundamental and inalienable. 2. An individual has a right to the management and control of the individual's digital identity to protect individual privacy. 3. An individual has a right to choose, receive, and use a physical form of identity, assertion that is endorsed by the state. 4. An individual has a right to not be compelled by the state to possess, use, or rely upon a digital form of identity assertion in place of a physical form of identity assertion that is endorsed by the state. 5. An individual has a right to state endorsement of the individual's digital identity upon meeting objective, uniform standards for eligibility and verification established by law, and a right to not have such endorsement arbitrarily or discriminatorily.
So I want to start with just this first one here. An individual has a right to exist, to literally be themselves. An individual has a right to manage and control their digital identity as an individual. Those two things are very uncommon in any typewise system or government. This is the first time I've ever seen anything like this in a governmental environment. Those are massive. We'll go ahead and continue, but I want to make sure you understand what this is all built on.
Discriminatorily withheld or revoked. 6. An individual has a right to have the state's operation of digital identity systems governed by clear standards established by the legislature, including for eligibility, issuance, endorsement, acceptance, revocation, or interoperability of digital identity assertions. 7. An individual has a right to transparency in the design and operation of a state digital identity, including the right to access, read, and review the standards and technical specifications upon which the state digital identity is built and operates. Left parenthesis. 8. An individual has the right to choose what identity attributes are disclosed by the individual state digital identity in accordance with standards established by the legislature. 9. An individual has the right to any service or benefit to which the individual is otherwise lawfully entitled based on the individual's choice of a lawful format or means of identity, assertion without denial, diminishment, or condition. 10. An individual has a right to be free from surveillance, profiling, tracking, or persistent monitoring of the individual's assertions of digital identity by the state, except.
So in other words, not only can the state, does the state enable the individual to be their own self, but they also basically say that they won't take it from you and they can't control you or see when you actually use it. So it gives the control to the individual. That's very key.
Except as authorized by law. 11. An individual has a right to not be required by the state to surrender the individual's device in order to present the individual's digital identity.
And it's not just the device. It ties to, when you're talking about these keys, you don't have to have a device to basically do it. It goes much deeper. Yes, you exit from a device, but it doesn't start or stop there. So before I go any further, does anybody have any feedback on this particular section of this Digital Identity Bill of Rights? Thoughts, comments, concerns, anything? For me, this is one of the biggest things that I've ever seen in my adult life. That's, heck, in my whole life, that can really provide freedom. So it'll be interesting to see if people get it, but we'll go to the next section.
As used in this chapter. 1. Cross-context correlation means the ability of a person to link, associate, or infer that the presentation of a state-endorsed digital identity originating with the same or another person relates to the same individual. 2. Data privacy ombudsperson means the data privacy ombudsperson created in section 63A 19501. 3. Digital guardian means a person authorized to act in the best interest and on behalf of another individual. B. Digital guardian includes a representative designated by the individual as described in the rules made by the department. 2. Custodial parent of an.
So imagine if a parent, like today, let's say that I purchased my child. Well, I'm not a good example because most, I basically have kids from 18 to 28. So let's say that someone on this call that has a child that's under 18 purchases an Apple phone. They pay for the Apple support, they pay for the cellular support, they pay for the cell phone, the voice, data, text, everything, okay? And then they actually want to have access to that phone. Well, not only does the parent or the child not own the phone physically, even though the parent paid for it, but the parent can't access the data on it. And the individual, the child, actually puts the data, their data, into Apple's system and doesn't necessarily have full rights to that. So think about it from a guardianship standpoint. Not only does a parent lose the control when there's a device in their child's hand, but even if they said, hey, I want the password, I want to reset it, or they go into Apple and they literally can't do it. It's the actual owner of it that actually ties to it. If you notice, whenever you get an Apple device, you have to actually log in with an Apple account. So you're starting with a centralized system. This ability to have something that actually ties not only from the individual first, but also from a guardianship standpoint is massively important. Not only as a parent of a child, but also, for instance, we have let's say a 50-year-old would have parents that are also getting up in age where they may have a responsibility to be a guardian over their parents' estate. This type of estate law can also tie to that same type of use case. So guardianship is a real big key. For me as an individual, I grew up in foster homes in LA, and I was actually given guardianship to myself because I was emancipated from the state of California at a young age of 16. So that guardianship thing is very real, and it can actually be given to other people, including the individual, which is an interesting concept. But what this is talking about is the state can actually endorse someone and then enable that someone to actually be a guardian of someone else and or let someone be a guardian of them. So these roles, it's literally taking the control of a government and putting it into an individual's hand that can then prove or not prove, that they can actually do it. And there'll be laws that'll be structured around this, but these are very, very important topics that may be foreign to a lot of different environments, but this guardianship stuff is key.
Unemancipated minor. 3. Legal guardian of a minor appointed under Section 755-202. Or I. Legal guardian of an incapacitated person appointed under Section 755-301. 4. Digital identity means an electronic record that an individual may use to assert an individual's identity or identity attributes. And B. A verifier can mathematically verify. 5. Digital wallet means an application, hardware, device, software, or
So there's going to be this thing in the technology world called watchers and witnesses and verifiers. And they basically use math, which is also known as cryptography, which is short for crypto. So identity does have ties to some of these math things, but it's not to be confused with what people would call the crypto industry or the speculative get rich quick schemes that everyone in that, or a good chunk of that industry is known for.
Service that securely stores, organizes, and manages a state digital identity. 6. Digital wallet provider means a person that creates, develops, maintains, supports, and makes available a digital wallet for a state digital identity. 7. Governmental entity means the same as that term is defined in Section 63A 19101. 8. Healthcare provider means the same as that term is defined in Section 78B 403. 9. Holder means an individual whose identity attributes are contained in the state digital identity. Or B. A digital guardian who manages and presents a state digital identity on behalf of the individual. 10. Identity means the qualities, features, or characteristics that identify or distinguish an individual. 11. Identity attribute means a specific quality, characteristic, fact, or information related to an individual's identity. 12. Identity proofing means the process of collecting, validating, and verifying information about an individual to establish confidence in the individual's claimed identity. 13. Identity proofing entity means an entity authorized the department to conduct identity proof for the purpose of issuing a state-endorsed digital identity. 14. Individual means a human being. 15. Minor means an individual who is under 18 years old. 16. Offline presentation means a presentation that does not involve the internet or other computer network. 17. Online presentation means a presentation that utilizes the internet or other computer network. 18. Parent means an individual who has established a parent-child relationship with a child as described in Section 815-201. 19. Person means an individual, corporation, organization, association, governmental entity, or other legal entity. 20. Personal digital identifier means an identifier that is, unique, B, created by or at the direction of an individual, C, mathematically provable to be under a holder's control, and D, transportable to technical infrastructure of the holder's choosing. Left parenthesis, 21. Physical identity means a physical record that an individual may use to as the individual's identity issued by, a governmental entity, B, the equivalent of a governmental entity in another state, C, the federal government, or D, another country. 22. Presentation means the disclosure of an individual's identity attributes from the individual's state digital identity to a verifier or relay party. 23. Process means any operation or set of operations performed on an individual's identity attributes. 24. Program means the state-endorsed digital identity program described in Section 63A 2202. 25. Program manager means the individual appointed under Section 63A 2203. 26. Relying party means a person that relies on a verifier's assertion of an individual's identity or identity attribute that a state digital identity provides. 27. Secure electronic device means a device capable of securely storing, presenting, or displaying state-endorsed digital identity, including physical tokens and accessible devices. 28. State digital identity means a state-endorsed digital identity, or B, an electronic license certificate or identification card issued in accordance with Section 53.3-235. 29. State-endorsed digital identity means an individual's digital identity that includes a personal digital identifier, and B, the department has issued. 30. Verifier means a person that mathematically verifies a state digital identity to evaluate the state digital identity's authenticity and integrity.
So these verifiers and watchers and witnesses are super important. I know that a lot of that may have just been words, but how they define these things is very, very specific and very different to any other architecture that humanity has actually done. So that's kind of the definitions. I know it's boring, but let's go ahead and jump into this next one. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts before I go to this next section? I know this may be boring, but this is where the rubber meets the road when it comes to laws, and so many folks don't ever dig into these types of things or care about them, but this is massively important and disruptive. Thoughts or comments before I move on?
Michael, can you just put that link in the chat when you get a chance?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and read this next one and then go ahead.
https://
There we go.
1. There is created within the department this endorsed digital identity program. 2. The department shall design, implement, administer, and issue a state-endorsed digital identity in compliance with the requirements in Part 3, State-endorsed digital identity. 3. In accordance with Title 63G, Chapter 3, Utah Administrative Rulemaking Act, the department shall make rules to administer this chapter. 2. Establish technological standards and best practices for governmental entities regarding left parenthesis A. The creation, issuance, use, and acceptance of a state-endorsed digital identity, and B. The collection, processing, storage, and disclosure of individual identity or identity attributes, and 3. Establish procedures for an individual to A. Apply for a state-endorsed digital identity, and B. Designate a digital guardian. B. The department shall accept public comment for a period of 45 days from the day the proposed rule is published in the Utah State Bulletin as described in Section 63G3-301, and 2. Issue a
Hopefully that happens within the next 30 days.
response to substantive comments.
So that means this thing could be live by, well, it could be approved by May of 2026 and is proposed to go into effect January 1, 2027.
Submitted by the public before making the proposed rule effective. 4. In furtherance of these duties, the department may consult with governmental entities, B. Government entities in other states, C. Technology experts, or D. Organizations that establish technology standards. 5. The department may establish fees in accordance with Section 63J1504 for issuing, renewing, or replacing a state-endorsed digital identity, or B. Apply for, accept, allocate, and administer grants, funds, or awards from any public or private source for the purpose of implementing this chapter. 6. Beginning on January 1st, 2027, the department shall annually report before June 1st to the Economic Development and Workforce Services Interim Committee regarding program implementation and adoption metrics. B. Security incidents and remediation steps taken in response. C. Comments submitted to the program by the public. D. Changes made to the program as a result of comments submitted by the public. E. Vendor ecosystem status, including number of conformant digital wallets and verifier tools. And F. Any recommended statutory changes.
Any thoughts, comments before I move on to the next section? I'm actually going to jump into part 3. I know we're losing folks, but this is just key. Here we go.
A state-endorsed digital identity shall incorporate state-of-the-art safeguards for protecting an individual's identity, including compromise detection, recovery mechanisms, and cross-context correlation protections. B. Include methods to establish authenticity and integrity. C. Be compatible.
So let me spell that out. Most blockchains today link a transaction and an individual, which is actually good from a transparency standpoint. But it's also important for privacy to be realized, but at the same time, if there is some collusion or something that needs to be defined or linked, a court of law can follow process and due process in law to basically be able to link or have that individual verify who they are and then links to other receipts or transactions. So you get the best of all the worlds. The system's actually Like think about the future financial systems or identity systems or payments or licenses or registrations or endorsements. I mean, you can actually have one place where they all are. You're in control of them, but yet you can actually go and this is the key. If this becomes a standard where multiple states have reciprocity, so they recognize one another, you can actually link them. So imagine if you could actually have a system. I'm going to jump ahead. Imagine if you had not just rewards, but if you actually had a system where you had state-endorsed digital identity, and let's say it was for your age or for marriage or residency or maybe vehicle ownership or business ownership, but take it to a whole nother category of what if it's a federal thing? What if you want to tie to a state department or a state, the Secretary of State around, let's say maybe a passport? Or what if it's a voter thing, whether it's a federal or a state or a county type structure? You literally have the ability to tie all these together as an individual, where maybe it's education based, maybe it's occupation based, but you actually own them and control them. This is very valuable, very, very important. So we'll go ahead and continue.
Compatible with a wide variety of technological systems while maintaining strong privacy or security. D. Support online and offline presentation. E. Enable a holder to I. Selectively disclose an individual's identity attributes. Or 2. Demonstrate that the individual meets a specified minimum age without.
By the way, you can have a physical, like your driver's license, or you can have a digital, one or the other, or both, or none. Like this is not forcing people, whereas most of the other systems force people to comply and get into it. This is providing choice. Very important. Not reading. I'm going to jump to a section that I think you guys may state. Okay, application. Here we go. This starts getting into some of the meat of it.
1. An individual who is at least 18 years old may apply to the department for a state-endorsed digital identity. 2. An individual who is under 18 years old may apply to the department for a state-endorsed digital identity only with the consent of the individual's digital guardian. 3. If an individual is unable to apply for a state-endorsed digital identity due to the individual's youth or incapacitation, the application may be made on behalf of that individual by the individual's digital guardian. Left parenthesis. B. A digital guardian applying on behalf of a minor or incapacitated person shall provide I. Identification as required by the department, and 2. The consent of the incapacitated person as required by the department. 4. The department shall make rules in accordance with Title 63G, Chapter 3, Utah Administrative Rulemaking Act, establishing the form and manner of an application under this section. B. Identity proofing requirements and procedures. And C. Procedures for denial, correction, reissuance, and compromise recovery consistent with this part. 5. An individual is not required to apply for or obtain a state-endorsed digital identity. 6. To apply for a state-endorsed digital identity, an applicant shall have lawful presence in the United States. B. Be a resident of Utah. And C. Successfully complete the department's identity proofing process established under this part. 7. The department.
This is one thing that I hope we can change. Just be a resident of Utah. I think it's very tight and something that, we originally brought up, but it's limiting. If not, we've got to get other states that basically light up their own state and other countries that light up their own countries under the same types of structures. Does that make sense?
May not require collection of information that is not necessary to verify identity or eligibility. B. Required information may include, as determined by the department and documented by rule. I. The applicant's true and full legal name. 2. Date of birth. 3. Utah residence address. I. Evidence of lawful presence in the United States. V. Evidence of Utah residency. And V. Other information strictly necessary to complete identity proofing.
Any thoughts on that section? Okay, we'll jump to the next one. Here we go.
The department shall establish and maintain identity proofing requirements for the issuance of a state-endorsed digital identity that I. Follow a generally accepted identity proofing standard. 2. Are commensurate with the risks of impersonation, fraud, and misuse associated with the credential. And 3. Are consistent with the privacy, civil liberties, and security requirements of this chapter. B. The identity proofing process shall be designed to establish, at a minimum, that I. The applicant is a real individual. 2. The applicant is the individual the applicant claims to be. 3. The applicant's birth date is the date the applicant claims it to be. And I. The applicant meets the eligibility requirements of Section 63A 2302. C. The department shall ensure that the identity proofing process results in a credential that provides a level of confidence in the individual's identity that is I. Sufficiently robust to support reliance by governmental entities and private sector, relying parties where required by law or policy for online age assurance, and 2. Appropriate for use in both online and offline presentations. D. Identity proofing processes shall be designed so that the state's endorsement I. reflect verification at a point in time, and 2. does not require A. continuous monitoring, or B. tracking. 2. An applicant shall provide true and accurate information as required under this part. B. Knowingly providing materially false information for the purpose of obtaining a state endorsed digital identity constitutes fraud and may result in denial, revocation, and other remedies provided by law. 3. Obtaining or holding a state endorsed digital identity does not affect an individual's physical identity documents. B. An individual is not required to surrender, cancel, or replace any physical identity document as a condition of applying for or holding a state.
So do you see how there's parallel systems here? You have your normal identity process, then you have this new parallel, and you don't have to give one up for the other.
State endorsed digital identity. 4. The department shall define by rule, in accordance with Title 63G, Chapter 3, Utah Administrative Rulemaking Act, the identity proofing standards and processes required for issuance of a state endorsed digital identity. B. The rule shall, at a minimum, I. specify the objectives the identity proofing process is intended to achieve. 2. Describe the acceptable methods of identity proofing, including A. in-person, remote, or hybrid methods, and the conditions under which each may be used, and B. minimum evidence requirements and validation methods. 3. Align with generally accepted identity proofing practices, and I. establish requirements and a process to become an identity proofing entity.
Any other thoughts? Anything that sparks anybody there? 1, 2, 2. Go ahead.
How is that validation taking place? What's the transition?
It looks like they're going to do some hybrid in person right here.
A. In-person, remote, or hybrid methods, and the conditions under which each.
So I don't know. First off, what they're going to do is say, hey, anybody that wants to provide a wallet can do it under these standards. Okay. And then they're going to pop out the standards, what they've started. And then those standards, and it actually talks about pieces of them. So you can get a wallet that gives you your own identity. And then there's a process. It looks like there's going to be an in-person or remote or a combination of them where you basically validate who you are, your birth date, your residency, and your physical elements. And, I would think that they would probably use the DMVs eventually for stuff like this, which there's a tier process of identifying 1, 2, and 3, and the DMVs are number 3. So they're the highest. You've got to provide proof of address, proof of identity, proof of citizenship or not, which is a whole nother conversation, and then proof of birth. And yeah, so, and in some cases, you can just walk across the border and not do any of that stuff, but that's a whole nother conversation. And, I won't even get into that because it really is a whole nother conversation, but I don't think it's defined yet, but I think that gives us a good outline. I think it'll eventually roll into, there's a difference in the state of Utah. There's a difference between a vehicle for the Department of Vehicles or Transportation versus a Department of Moving the motor vehicle. So they're the licensing division for the individual and a driver's license, and then a vehicle division for the vehicle and the registration that ties to that. They're two different animals, but I would think that they would probably have two different endorsements from two different divisions from that.
A governmental entity may not convey a material benefit upon an individual for using a state digital identity instead of a physical identity. B. Withhold services or benefits from an individual if the individual uses a physical identity or is otherwise unable to use a state digital identity. Or C. Require a holder to surrender the holder's secure electronic device in the course of a presentation. 2. A governmental entity that implements a new system that accepts a digital identity shall accept a state endorsed digital identity within 3 months from the date the first state endorsed digital identity is issued. B. A governmental entity is not required to accept a state endorsed digital identity within the time frame described in subsection 2. If the governmental entity A. demonstrates to the satisfaction of the department that accepting a state endorsed digital identity at that time is not technically feasible, and B. provides a plan for accepting a state endorsed digital identity as soon as feasible, or 2. is required by law to accept a specific form of state digital identity.
So here we go. This talks about healthcare providers and requirements, which I'm actually going through a process of testing some stuff. For instance, what if someone wants healthcare and they don't want to provide or can't provide ID? What happens? Should they get the health care? Should they not?
Within 2 years from the date the first state-endorsed digital identity is issued, a health care provider that receives at least $10 million a year in public funding shall accept a state-endorsed digital identity if the health care provider has a program or system that accepts a digital identity. 2. A health care provider is not required to accept a state-endorsed digital identity within the time frame described in subsection 1. If the health care provider, I, demonstrates to the satisfaction of the department that accepting a state-endorsed digital identity at that time is not technically feasible, and 2. Provides a plan for accepting a state-endorsed digital identity as soon as feasible, or B. Is required by law to only accept a specific form of state digital identity.
Any other thoughts, comments? This next section goes through the wallets. So this is actually, it ties to consequences within the Utah Consumer Privacy Act, but we'll get started on it.
A digital wallet produced by a digital wallet provider shall incorporate state-of-the-art safeguards for protecting an individual's identity. B. Process an individual's identity attributes in a manner. C. Comply with the requirements of this part through technological means where possible. D. Be tamper-resistant. E. Support online and offline presentation. F. Maintain a secure log. I. With sufficient information for the holder to know A. What identity attributes were provided, and B. The verifier or relying party the identity attributes were provided to. 2. Accessible only to the holder. 3. Exportable only by the holder. And I. Deletable only by the holder. G. Enable a holder to I. Selectively disclose an individual's identity attributes. Or 2. Demonstrate that the individual meets a specified minimum age without disclosing the individual's age or birth date and age. Allow a presentation by a digital guardian. 2. A digital wallet provider may only process an individual's identity attributes if the processing is necessary for a presentation. B. The holder has received conspicuous notice of I. What identity attributes are collected from the state digital identity. 2. How the identity attributes are used. 3. The purpose for which the identity attributes are processed. And I. How long the identity attributes are retained. And hence to the processing of the individual's identity attributes. 3. Information provided by a holder to a digital wallet provider may only be processed for the primary purpose for which the holder disclosed the information. And B. Used, retained, sold, or shared. I. As expressly authorized by the holder. Or 2. If required by law. 4. Nothing in this section relieves a digital wallet provider from complying with the requirements of Title 13, Chapter 44, Protection of Personal Information Act, or Title 13, Chapter 61, Utah Consumer Privacy Act.
So those are two other acts that we basically have already talked about before. This goes through the verifiers.
A verifier shall incorporate state-of-the-art safeguards for protecting an individual's identity in the verification process. B. Comply with the requirements of this part through technological means where possible. C. Process an individual's identity attributes in a secure manner. D. Process only the minimum identity attributes reasonably necessary to achieve a specified purpose defined by the relying party requesting the presentation. And E. Accept a presentation by a digital guardian. 2. A verifier may only process an individual's identity attributes if authorized by the holder. B. The processing is necessary for a presentation. C. The holder has received conspicuous notice of I. What identity attributes are collected. 2. How the identity attributes are used. 3. The purpose for which the identity attributes are processed. And I. How long the identity attributes are retained. And D. The holder consents to the processing of the identity attributes. 3. A verifier may not require a holder to surrender the HIS in the course of a presentation. 4. Nothing in this section relieves a verifier from complying with the requirements of Title 13, Chapter 44, Protection of Personal Information Act, or Title 13, Chapter 61, Utah Consumer.
We're almost done. Thank you for your hanging in there. I know that some of you, this may be difficult to get through, but it's important. Like, this is where I think most politicians actually fall down. They vote for things without really understanding it. And I believe that this is a cornerstone for not only the digital world, but for the state of Utah and future governments that have citizens, whether they're nationals or whatever they want to call them.
A relying party shall incorporate state-of-the-art safeguards for protecting an individual's identity in the verification process. B. Comply with the requirements of this part through technological means where possible. C. Process an individual's identity attributes in a secure manner. D. Process only the minimum identity attributes reasonably necessary to achieve a specified purpose. And E. Accept a presentation by a digital guardian. 2. A relying party may only process an individual's identity attributes if authorized by the holder. B. The processing is necessary for a specified purpose. C. The holder has received conspicuous notice of I. What identity attributes are collected. 2. How the identity attributes are used. 3. The purpose for which the identity attributes are processed. And I. How long the identities are retained. And D. The holder consents to the processing of the identity attributes. 3. A relying party may not require a holder to surrender the holder's secure electronic device in the course of a presentation. 4. A relying party may accept a state-endorsed digital identity as proof of an individual's identity or identity attributes unless a different method of proof is required by law. 5. Nothing in this section relieves a relying party from complying with the requirements of Title 13, Chapter 44, Protection of Personal Information Act, or Title 13, Chapter 61, Utah Consumer Privacy.
I personally do have some issues with the way some of those are written, but we're actually going to the Senate tomorrow, so we'll spend a little bit more time on pieces of them because it really needs to be tied to the individual first, which it doesn't specifically state.
The department, a digital wallet provider, a verifier, a relying party, and a digital guardian shall refrain from practices or activities related to the processing of an individual's identity attributes that 1. Conflict with the best interests of an individual. 2. Take advantage of or otherwise exploit an individual. 3. Result in a disproportionate to an individual. 4. Are to an individual's detriment. Or 5. Cause harm to an individual. Any record of a presentation of a state digital identity may only be processed by a digital wallet provider, a verifier, or a relying party, for the primary purpose for which the presentation was performed, or b. if required by law. 2. Information provided by a holder, verifier, or relying party to a verifier or relying party in the course of a presentation may only be processed for the primary purpose for which the holder disclosed the information, and b. used, retained, sold, or shared. Left parenthesis I. Following conspicuous notice to and express authorization by the holder, or 2. if required by law.
Now, this next part, part 8, talks about basically if there's a problem, what folks can actually do. And I personally think that there's some problems here because the individual's rights are taken from them to defend themselves or stand up if there's a violation. They're relying on this OBS person that receives information to be able to escalate it to an attorney general or a department to do it. In my opinion, should also be the right of the individual to be able to do. A good example of this is the Disabilities Act. I think that there's some abuse with that, but all in all, it's been a disruptive thing where it literally levels the playing field. And that's what is needed within the digital world or the digital ecosystem. And it's not just for this particular thing, but also for what they call the Utah Choice Act, the Utah Digital Choice Act, which is really important. But it does the same thing as far as enforcement goes, and that needs to just one sentence on each of these, and they're basically done. Here we go.
An individual may submit a complaint to the Data Privacy Ombudsperson alleging a violation of this chapter by the department, b. a digital wallet provider, c. a verifier, or d. a relying party. 2. The Data Privacy Ombudsperson may receive and review a complaint described in subsection 1.3 if, after reviewing a complaint, the Data Privacy Ombudsperson has reasonable cause to believe that a violation of this chapter has occurred. The Data Privacy Ombudsperson may refer the complaint to the Attorney General. 4. Upon receiving a referral under subsection 3, or when the Attorney General has reasonable cause to believe that a violation of this chapter has occurred, the Attorney General is authorized to issue civil investigative demands for depositions, documents, and requests for information in the time and manner prescribed by the Attorney General, and b. bring a civil action in a court of competent jurisdiction to I. enjoin a violation of this chapter, 2. obtain declaratory relief regarding compliance with this chapter, or 3. recover damages, restitution, and disgorgement on behalf of an individual injured by a violation of this chapter. 5. The Attorney General shall treat all information received in accordance with subsection 4 as non-public and confidential unless confidentiality is waived by the providing party or upon the filing of an enforcement action. 6. In an action brought under subsection 4, the court may award injunctive relief, b. declaratory relief, c. equitable relief including restitution and disgorgement, d. actual damages, e. costs, and f. reasonable attorney fees.
So I don't think that's done right. I think there needs to be one more section there where the individual can actually defend or uphold themselves.
Subject to prioritization of the Legislative Audit Subcommittee created in Section 3612-8, the Office of the Legislative Auditor General shall conduct an audit of the program beginning on January 1st, 2028. 2. The audit shall evaluate the department's compliance with this chapter, b. whether the department has met the restrictions on monitoring, surveillance, and tracking described in Section 63A 2301, c. the effectiveness of the program in meeting the objectives established in this chapter, left parenthesis, d. the appropriate long-term placement of the program within state government, and e. recommended statutory changes to improve the program. 3. The Office of the Legislative Auditor General shall complete report by October 31st, 2028, b. provide the audit report to the legislature, and c. present the audit findings to the Legislative Audit Subcommittee at the subcommittee's next meeting after completion of the audit report.
So the rest of it's basically accountability stuff. That's the whole thing. I know many of you that was painful, but I think that this is key for anything that's going into law to support, to get behind, especially to build a world behind. It's important to really read it and understand what it is. I know some of you may say, well, I don't understand what that is, but hopefully as we kind of counseled through it and just discussed it, it's something that each of you can actually come to understand. I want you to know I've met Kurt Killamore. He's a good person. He's a good human being, a good father, a good man. And I think his heart is in the right place. He's actually an attorney by trade. I spent some time with him at some events, primarily outside of Utah, which is funny because you actually leave Utah to meet some of these folks. But and then there's other folks that, just good, solid. Chris Bramwell is one of the best I've ever met when it comes to government. He cares. He's accountable.
Outside of Utah.
Pays attention
It's
to
funny
detail.
because you actually leave Utah to meet some of these folks.
Getting some
and
feedback on
there's other
somebody
folks that-
replaying there. But anyways, I'll go ahead and break from that. Is there any thoughts or comments or observations that anyone might have? I know we just went over a lot of stuff, but
I've,
go ahead.
I do have a thought. The legislation is so impressive that even the ACLU is saying, Utah's the only state that actually is doing digital identity right, and that says a lot coming from the ACLU. So
Yeah, we actually had the ACLU here in October, and I'll bet you they'll be back here again in April. So yeah, they actually talked, and they actually were very firm in some of these things, and they're standing up for right. They're paying attention to details too. So good observation. I didn't even see that. So maybe you could share a link to that if you've got it. Just pop it in here. Other thoughts or comments or observations, feedback, concerns? I mean, concerns are also more than welcome.
Michael, I have a few comments and a couple of questions, perhaps, because we've been wrestling with this right the way through down here in New Zealand, and you might have seen I posted about developments in Utah today, because we are all watching, and we do see you and the state legislature in Utah leading the way in digital identity done right. So yeah, the truth is on your side. My observations would be the guardian relationship, guardian child, guardian caregiver, cared for person, whatever the ailment. That's really important to make sure that's seen as normal, and it has been forgotten. And actually, we were submitting on this today, and people still forget that. So it's great that you've been leading the way there. And the other thing I'd observe, you're obviously catching some of the issues. I mean, we've made the distinction between kind of regulated use and unregulated use. I don't know if that's the right distinction, so maybe that's a bit of a question in terms of user control of identity. And then the other thing we're sort of grappling with is, what does the ecosystem look like once this law is in place? Because obviously there's the government or the state will be required to govern the law. So what does that mean for vendors? Is that even the right way to look at it? Is there room for need for not-for-profits? It's just trying to imagine how this is going to work in practice, or is it just fully decentralized? And it's just kind of trying to figure out how the standard tools are used and productized, for people so they can consume them.
What I personally think is very interesting is how they've tied a good chunk of it around health, because I personally believe that identity, the current system, identity and payments with AI wrapped with health, is actually something that will control humanity at a level that's very, very deep. And where they're saying, if you want to engage the health system, you can use a decentralized digital identity like this. That changes that control, that changes and provides a choice, which then provides a freedom that we just don't have. And I think that they're like Wayne Gretzky. They're playing to a puck, which is really good because they're listening and paying attention, but they're also being open. It's open to prior other systems, for instance, MDoc, or other systems. Maybe it's other providers, like let's say Apple. How can Apple actually play a role in this? Or how can Google play a role in it, or Microsoft play a role in it? A lot of these different centralized systems, or even, what's the little gold star? Real ID. That's actually a French-based company that does payments, but they actually have cryptographic-based IDs that then tie into these centralized systems, which is the current way of doing it. And they're saying you don't have to throw that away and you don't have to give it away. This is something that is a parallel system, which is a choice. And that's massive. The guardianship side of it's massive. The ability for, I think, vendors to be able to be neutral in if they adopt it or if they don't adopt it is going to provide free enterprise where if this type of a system could actually enable people to get, let's say that people could actually, and vendors could actually make a payment in real time. Okay. Real time is one, a payment with no fees. That's two, a payment that actually enables the individual to prove that they purchased something, a transaction that can build a reputation for the individual or the vendor, a reward that could even tie to it, as well as receipts that tie to it that are private. All of those things are good at the transaction and payment layer. So the vendors may look at this as something that they want. For instance, if you go and get a ride to a hospital, the vehicle would know, do they have the funds and do they have a good reputation? And they may just know your first name. They don't need to know details. We already see this with Uber and Lyft, but this is a whole nother system where you're taking Uber and Lyft out of it and potentially connecting an individual with another system directly. And one thing that, they're not mandating that everyone adopt it, but that's just a benefit and feature of 5 sets within just the vendor payment side of things. That doesn't even include the endorsements from the state. So, or a federal endorsements. My concerns are, and maybe this is just, let's be conservative. Let's just focus on Utah. Let's limit it to people that are in Utah that are full-blown residents. And then you define that, because it actually gets very easy to go through that process. But the goal is to stand up other jurisdictions and enable other jurisdictions that can actually do it in their own So for instance, you're in New Zealand or Aotearoa. What does this even, let's say that New Zealand was to adopt this. What's the benefit of New Zealand? Could it just be for the individual to be private? Is that enough for the New Zealand, the crown and the government to say, let's go do it? Or could New Zealand leverage something like this and say, hey, let's actually take it to another level? Like New Zealand is really good. I think they're one of the best places to do business. The business entity listing, the ability to get listed, the ability to have transparency, the ability to get unlisted. All of those things are really good and mature. The problem is they're too transparent. The privacy is violated on multiple standpoints. So if New Zealand was to adopt a system like this and the decentralized autonomous law or organization laws, like the DAO laws that Utah currently has, which I don't believe they're currently implementing the right way. If they implemented it on a system similar to what New Zealand has, where the business registry is mature, like I'm not saying that Utah's not, but the Utah business registry and DAO laws today, I don't think gel. But if they were to gel, and then you basically enable businesses to be private, just like what's happening here, I think that whether it's Utah or New Zealand or wherever, people and organizations would go there. The limitation that Utah's put on themselves is they're saying it's only good for Utah residents, which I think is going to impact, adoption. Because a lot of people would literally say, I'm in. And just like what happened with the decentralized or digital cryptographic guaranteed marriages, which they've done over almost 115,000 of them, put $6 million in profit bottom line per year to the counties. These are revenue generating services that people from around the world come to Utah to drive. But, limiting it to residents, I think, is going to have an issue. And to the point of your question, Andy, or comment, I think that the adopt vendors is still out and not being forced. They're not even thinking about that at this stage. I think it's the weak part of this whole thing where show me any kind of endorsement that a government has that's actually been massively adopted, other than things like Real ID where it's just forced upon you. It's like, hey, by this time frame, you're going to get this kind of ID. If you don't have it, it's not accepted. We'll do this when you travel. And It just continually closed down the rights. And the problem is once you give those rights away, you can't actually get them back. And this actually gives not only those back, but a whole nother parallel track to it. So I don't know if I've even talked to your comments around vendor adoption and how it works, but I don't think they're addressing it to the level that you're asking. So.
No, it's good to talk about it. I mean, I still think the question is the channel to market, and you can imagine different marketplaces. You could go through cities, you could go through accounting software vendors, you could go through airlines, people with a lot of customers, or organizations with a lot of customers. That's one option. But the question I've still got is if those are the cars, the vehicles that go on the roads, who owns the roads? Or is it just fully decentralized and people choose to adopt digital identity or not, and it's at the end user level? And then the
Is that just me?
becomes
Is that my connection or his connection? Is that my connection or his connection?
to any trust. Yeah.
Log back in. For those of you online, we're just going to try and get the audience back here. Maybe I should just shut this down and start it over. We'll do that real fast. That's the problem. We're just working through some technicalities. There, that should get them back. Hang on, everybody. Testing, 3, 2, 1. You able to still see us online, question mark? There we go. Thanks for hanging in there. We lost our live audience, but hopefully we'll get them back here in a second. Well, I'm still up, period. Just trying to get into the online community here. Are you still in, question mark? Everybody still in, question mark? I'm on my way back in, period.